Hello everybody and welcome back to a brand new live stream. Make sure you like this stream down below. Make sure you subscribe to the channel if you are new. Make sure you hit that bell so you never miss another stream or video. And we didn't have a video today, but I said, hey, you know what? We haven't done a live stream in like 5 days. So I think it's a good thing that we just go live and talk about all this stuff that's happening in the 2024 race, what's going on with the House, who's our speaker going to be, what's happening, what's going on there. And on top of that, you see this conflict brewing in the Middle East as we speak. It is getting out of hand potentially, and you have people and politicians on both sides. They are trying to get the public invested in potentially another conflict. Do we have any business being in this conflict? We're going to be talking about it. Is it that much different than the conflict that we're seeing between Russia and Ukraine? We're going to get to all of that in this stream. Make sure you guys like the stream down below. Subscribe if you're new here. Subscribe to chat. You can't chat unless you are a subscriber. But yeah, World War III, are we on the verge? We'll have to find out. Obviously, there's a lot we don't know. But it does seem like there's a feeling, because it does seem like every election year there's something that happens, and we're almost to another election year. Think back to 2019. Donald Trump seemed to be a favorite for re-election, even if he wasn't polling ahead of Joe Biden or the other Democrats. You had a very strong, robust economy that was getting stronger and stronger and stronger every single day. And on top of that, you kind of had this little trouble brewing in China that was like laughed at and talked about, but we didn't really see what would happen until, you know, after, I guess you would say, the first quarter of 2020. The whole world just stopped. It came to a grinding halt. And I feel like there's a feeling you might see something. I'm not saying it's going to be another pandemic that's going to be taking place, but something drastic could happen between now and then. And Biden might be banking on it. And we're going to talk about this as well in terms, I covered this in the last video, but as much as we're going to be, talking about the 2024 campaign, Biden's approval rating is at an all-time low. And his approval rating on every issue, you want to look at his approval on the economy. His approval on the economy, he's down 23 points. Look at it on immigration, he's down 30. Look at it on inflation, he's down 33. So regardless of however you look at Biden's approval rating, it's in the gutter. He's going to need something drastic in order to really change the way things are going. Donald Trump is beating him in the popular vote in nearly every poll. And of course, the DeSantis people can cope. And they could say the polls are skewed in favor of Trump because they want him to be the nominee. So every single polling firm out there wants Trump to be the nominee. They're showing Trump ahead of DeSantis. Or is it maybe a problem with your candidate? Is it a problem with you? The bottom line remains the same. Donald Trump's been indicted 4 times, and he's surged in not just primary polling, but general election polling, because people don't like Biden, and people know that pre-pandemic Trump was a very good president, even if they didn't realize it at the time. Looking at where we were on foreign policy, looking at where we were regarding the economy, inflation under control, before COVID at least. And then you look at things like the border crisis, that was under control. You had the Remain in Mexico policy. Now, even this administration's trying to sort of pretend to build the wall even, which is something that we're vastly opposed to about, a year ago. I don't know what exactly is the status with that, but we hear these rumblings here and then that even they know that it's time to act, because that is how bad things are getting. And the public is well aware of the mass migration scam and what we're seeing at the border. They said, come to the border, have this insurgents. Well, we've seen that. And as a result, you have millions of people pouring into the country, these illegal aliens. What are they there for? They're there for many reasons, but you talk about the change of America, the globalists, the Democrats, they want mass migration from all of these places. They want to naturalize these people. They want to give them amnesty. They're going to be votes. They're free votes. They're people that they see as easy to control, because they know that the old American public, they've lost control. But at the same time, the globalists, that's where the control really is within our government. So it's going to be very difficult. Even the Republican Party does tend to have this problem. And that's the way it is. But the American people are aware that Biden is a failure. That I can tell you. They are aware Biden's a failure. And you look at the numbers, they are in the gutter in every single poll for every single issue. In fact, Biden's favorability rating is actually higher than his approval on the issues. And if you have somebody like Trump who has a record that you can compare and that you can contrast with Biden's record as president, you're looking at all the key issues. Inflation under control. Biden can cope about, oh, well, you spent X amount of money. Biden spent more despite having the pandemic in the rearview mirror. And then you look at the economy. Trump's economy, very, very strong. Objectively strong. Pre-COVID, it was extremely strong. Even things like the unemployment rate now, maybe you can attribute that to the Trump economy, but that's like the only good economic metric you have now, because you saw wages growing under Trump. You don't see them growing under Biden. They're not keeping up with inflation, even if you want to say they're growing X amount of percent. And that's a major problem. Just the past quarter or so, you see the wage growth slightly go above the inflation. But even then, it's not enough to really make up for what we've seen over the past couple of years. You look at the economy, people love the Trump economy. Anyone out there is saying they're not going to give Trump credit for the economy 5 years ago. These voters weren't born yesterday. They've been voting for, in most cases, I'm not talking about people that were 18 and just voting, because they 5 years ago obviously didn't really seem all that invested in the economy, but your average age of a voter is in their 50s. Of course, they remember the economy from 5 years ago. They remember the economy from 20 years ago, unless they're as brain dead as somebody like Joe Biden or John Fetterman, but that's really beside the point. Foreign policy, especially with these conflicts, you talk about these failures, supposed in the case of especially Ukraine, they're our supposed ally, according to these people even. And you see Russia's going out there just taking land, and they're not exactly losing the war that we're funding. And it's a war that's not popular. A lot of people just say, let Russia and Ukraine duke it out. It's not exactly our problem. And I mean, a lot of people do tend to be a little bit more invested in this other conflict that may be happening in Israel with Palestine. But still, either way, funding a conflict with a blank check, that what we've been doing, and it's not just Democrats, it's also a lot of House Republicans have been doing it. It's not exactly something that's a recipe for success. Crime's been a disaster. Crime is probably the only thing where I'd probably say that I feel as if Trump, in terms of these issues, because obviously there's other issues, but in terms of crime, that was one issue where Trump, you could argue, dropped the ball. He caved into these people that were in his administration. He caved into these people, and he pushed the First Step Act, which I believe he now regrets. He doesn't tout it as an accomplishment. He touts every other accomplishment he had. The messaging is improved. Do I believe he learned his lesson? Yeah. And it's ironic because Ron DeSantis voted for the first iteration of it, and then the second one, the final one that came into law, he praised it multiple times, and now he pretends like he never did for whatever reason. But you're looking at the crime under Biden, it's much worse. It's much worse overall. The crime rate is spiked, especially in a lot of these cities, and Republicans that actually run on crime and don't run from crime do very well electorally, even in places they're not supposed to do well in, like New York, for example. And then you look at all these issues, folks, Biden's losing on all of them. Donald Trump, he's basically going to be the nominee at this point. I don't know how many times we have to talk about, oh, Ron DeSantis is falling in the polls, which it's fun to talk about, and I continue to talk about it because it is fun, and it's possible he's going to be going into third place, and we could say, oh, well, he went from 30% in the beginning of April, now he's down at 12. Even when he announced he's down, he's lost over half of his support from his disaster of an announcement. I mean, it's embarrassing for Ron DeSantis. But do we have to keep talking about this ad nauseum when the gap between Donald Trump and Ron DeSantis is almost as big as Chris Christie? I don't exactly know, because we know who the nominee is going to be. Now, we're still going to analyze it. What are the numbers going to be? How wide can the gap get? Right now, 45 points. That's big. That's a big gap overall. I mean, we'll have to see if that gap can increase. I mean, some polls, it's up to 56. I mean, there's some polls in there that are outliers, that time and time again, they underestimate Trump's support, like the Insider Advantage poll. But even in those polls where it says he's up by 35, he still has gained a lot since the previous poll. And you could say it's not a national primary, but we've seen Iowa. The polls there are not much better for Ron. The polls in Florida are disastrous for Ron. We hear about, oh, Ron's so popular in Florida. Then you'd be able to do better than a 35-point Republican primary loss, Ron, if you are so popular in Florida. If with the same electorate, Donald Trump would not have won by probably a similar margin to what he won by in the state of Florida. He had a low turnout election. He outspent his opponent by $100 million. He won by an impressive margin, but when you read between the lines, it doesn't necessarily translate to national electoral success. Did John McCain winning Arizona by 50 points in 2004 give him the nation in 2008? Of course not. And yes, there's other factors, but even if you had a good economy and everything went well, there's no way that McCain would have won nationwide based off of how strong he may be in a state like Arizona, and he wouldn't win Arizona by close to 50 if everything went right. Maybe you could say the low teens or something like that, where he was like this electoral juggernaut in the state at the Senate level, but not every single election is created equal. It's really not. Romney, I think, got a similar margin, if not better, than McCain, despite not having any ties to Arizona. So either way, can't win in Florida, can't win in Iowa or New Hampshire, getting drilled into a distant third in South Carolina, possibly distant fourth, depending on what Tim Scott does there. Folks, it's brutal. I mean, this is brutal. And we could talk about this ad nauseum, but there's so much other things going on, and I'm sure people will send in super chats about 2024 that we'll get to. But nevertheless, Biden's approval, this is kind of what we're pivoting to now, because we know who our nominee is going to be. Therefore, we have to say, okay, how do we go out there and beat this guy? And that's true. Possibly, a lot of people are saying, could Biden be replaced? And at first I said no, but at some point, the odds of it happening are higher now than I believe they would be. And I do think Biden probably would do better in an election compared to somebody like Kamala Harris, but do I think some Democrats might be pressuring Newsom and kind of getting Newsom to try to like roll the dice with him and run for president? It's possible. It's possible they could get Biden out of the way because they know that Donald Trump probably beats Biden in an election. So they're like, okay, well, maybe we should run somebody else. Is it going to work for him? Probably not. But at that point, you wouldn't have to exactly run directly in line with Biden's record, which again is something people on the left, if they're smart, I'm not trying to give them the playbook, but the talks have been already done. We know that. But Biden probably is going to run. He's probably going to be their nominee. And as a result, he's probably going to lose. He is. He's probably going to lose. And then we got to talk about the conflict, because this is something that doesn't make Biden look good. It doesn't make you look good when you have a country that you support as a government relentlessly that just gets attacked. It just seems like it comes off like a failure. And if you have to fund this conflict, which, by the way, I don't believe we need to be funding the conflict. I don't believe we need to be getting involved in it. I don't think we need to be getting involved in the Russia-Ukraine conflict. I don't think we need to be getting involved in the Israel-Palestine conflict. And folks are saying, well, it's technically different, this, that, and the other thing. Here's the deal. Israel has a lower debt to GDP ratio than the U.S. Israel can take care of they can take care of themselves. They don't need us to be throwing them billions upon billions of dollars in order to go out there and defeat Hamas. Do you know how many people are in the Israeli army reserves? Not even active, but in the reserves. They have 500,000 people in the reserves. That's a big portion of their population. They're already trained. And then you look at the total size of the Hamas army, the highest estimates are like 40,000. If they wanted to take them out instantly, they obviously could, to the point where why do we exactly have to get involved? We have no business getting involved. They're not like, there's no major real threat. Of course, there's going to be terrorists that are doing bad things across the world. That happens in a lot of countries. Does that mean we need to get involved and fund every single conflict? We have a crisis on our own southern border. We can't even preserve our own border in terms of its existence. We can't. It's very porous. You have people pouring through by the millions every year. It's gotten far worse under Biden. And you have people like Tom Cotton, who I like on domestic issues, but on foreign policy, he's not one of our strongest senators, to say the least. But you're looking at him, and he's saying basically, oh, well, we need to send in reinforcements. We need to send reinforcements. We don't even have reinforcements securing our own border. Why do we need reinforcements in other countries' borders? This is not a conflict where the United States needs to be getting involved in. This isn't even about protecting allies or whatever, because even if you take that presumption, they can protect themselves. They can protect themselves with ease. You know, I don't like Hamas, and people are saying, well, you support Hamas if you don't support sending these people in. It's like, you're ridiculous. You're missing the point. This is the guilt trap these people are trying to do. It's the same people that said if we didn't send money overseas, Russia's going to be taking over half of Europe. And that hasn't even remotely happened in the slightest, to the point where it's just like ridiculous. The fear mongering, you see it because they want another war. They do. And honestly, I think you'll see even some of the anti-China stuff transpire into that. And I don't support China, obviously, but the people like DeSantis is going out there and he's being non-committal to being, engaging in militarism with China. I don't think it's a smart move. Do we want to get into World War III? No. I like Trump's approach. Trump is not overly antagonistic. He's tough on China, which is good, but it's the economic approach. He views them as an adversary. He views them as a threat to us in terms of, they're the number one economy. They're the growing economy. They've gutted the American dream in part, but it's mainly our own politicians' fault because they're dumb. They're stupid. That's the real problem. And if we have good leadership that stands up to everybody and doesn't allow countries to take advantage of us, then, that's definitely something that would be much better off than what we have now. And we don't need to be engaging in militarism with these other countries that could potentially at some point wage war on our soil. We don't want that happening. These are massive armies. They're trained very well. They actually do everything they possibly can to encourage things like masculinity training, where over here you have the complete opposite basically happen for everything. It's a disaster, folks. It is an utter disaster what's going on. Our leaders, even some of the leaders on the right, they just don't get it. They just don't get it. And that's the bottom line. We don't need to be sending aid. And this might be unpopular with some people, because I know there's a lot of people on the right that do tend to be pro-Israel and all. But still, this is not a conflict that we have to be in. Even if you want to take that as a presumption, this is not a conflict that the United States needs to be getting involved in, when it should be America first. We can't even secure our own border. And it's very evident at this point that Israel has the manpower to deal with Hamas. We don't need to be sending billions of taxpayer dollars over there, just like we've been doing with Ukraine, which we definitely should not be doing either. So that's my take on it. I don't think it's that unpopular. I think it's just common sense. You're looking at the big picture here. I mean, there's not a reasonable objection to anything that I've just said. And the fact that all people can come up with is, well, you must support Hamas, you must hate Jews or whatever. These people are ridiculous. This is how neocons and obviously a lot of people in the center left, they're trying to guilt trip people into getting involved in yet another conflict that the United States has no business getting involved in halfway across the globe, when we have so many problems at our own southern border and just within our country at large that we can't even deal with. And there's going to be people that say, well, Rep, you could walk and chew gum at the same time. Our government can't do anything properly. What makes you think that they're going to be able to be capable of walking and chewing gum at the same time? They can't do anything right. They can't. That's the way it works. So I don't think anything I'm saying is unpopular in the slightest, but you see potentially the House is going to try to send aid packages tomorrow. We still don't have an aid package for the southern border. We don't have an aid package for the opioid crisis, the homelessness crises that we see in our cities, our infrastructure. We have nothing for that, to the point where it's like, what is our leadership doing? Their interests are everywhere except for right here where they should be, at home in this country. 100% true. It's sad, but it's true. So here we go. I did want to look and bring this up here because this is a map that I found and it's been circulating on Twitter or X, I should say, because that's what it is now. So you're looking at this, and it shows that there is massive support, and Jim Jordan is leading so far in terms of the endorsements to be Speaker of the House, and he's actually going out there and he's making deals per se to get more endorsements. He's the front runner. The fact that he's the front runner gives him all of the leverage. All he said to the extent of something where you'd say he's caving would be the fact that he said that he would protect vulnerable like moderates or whatever, which again, depends how you define it. For example, like, yeah, I'm okay with people in like light blue districts that I might not agree with 100% of the time, just as long as they're relatively solid compared to what they could be. For example, I'm not going to support somebody who's like a Mike Lawler per se, or an Adam Kinzinger, or somebody along the lines of that. But do I support people like Youngkin? Do I support people like Mike Garcia in California, even if I disagree with some of the votes? Yeah, because, you fit your district relatively well. So honestly, I'm not entirely opposed to that based off of what he's saying, and it doesn't really seem like there's a whole lot of people this cycle that are going to be primaried out, and it does seem like the package that was agreed to for the House anyways was going to leave these open seat primaries open for all, to the point where it's like, okay, so we're seeing an improvement over the previous rules regardless. Doesn't matter. Either way, Jordan would be a great speaker. He's not somebody who's going to be sending a blank check to Ukraine the way McCarthy was, and it shows because there's not this like destruction in the House. We heard, oh, this is going to be a disaster, this is chaotic. No, it's called holding people accountable. And like I said, this would bounce off. McCarthy would fade into irrelevancy, and you would get a better speaker. I'm so glad that we now have to decide not between Paul Ryan and Kevin McCarthy, but now it's between Steve Scalise and Jim Jordan. That's all it comes down to. And also, you could get a Speaker of the House who is well-liked by a lot of Republican voters and who's overall likable. Even by, like, he's always an overperformer in his district anyways. People like him in Jordan. He's from Ohio. I know that, yes, is he 100% perfect? Well, I think you look at his donations. I think of the big tech stuff, there's question marks there because I think he got some donations from Google or whatever. But it does seem overall on the issues, compared to what you could get overall, Jordan is a fighter more so than not, even if he might have a flaw here and there. He's been great. He's had one of the best voting records in the entire House. And if you could get him to be speaker throughout this whole ordeal, that would be impressive. That would be amazing, to the point where it's like, yeah, there's going to be a lot of people out there that are going to have to fill out that Matt Gaetz apology form. Fill it out. I mean, fill it out. It's going to have to be done. And technically, we're not there yet. I'm not saying it's guaranteed, but the possibility is on the table. And that possibility at this point has the most leverage. And you see technically the MTG vote for Trump, that's going to go to Jordan. Trump has endorsed Jordan. Jordan seems to be the consensus pick. He's even picking up endorsements of Republicans that I ordinarily would not have expected there to be, to the point where it's like, yeah, I don't think you're going to have too many holdouts when it's all said and done. Hopefully there's not a lot of caving that's to be done, but either way, you get a massive upgrade over McCarthy. And Donald Trump endorsed the correct candidate for this speakership, by the way, which proves my point. It's like, oh, well, he hasn't learned his lesson. He hasn't learned his lesson. Well, he's supporting the best candidate. He's not supporting Scalise, who a lot of people are saying, oh, he's only slightly better than McCarthy, or, oh, he's McCarthy light. He's supporting Jordan. And you could say, well, why did he support McCarthy in the first place? That's a valid question. I would say that it was very unlikely that anybody other than McCarthy could reasonably get that speakership role. So that's the way I see it, regardless. But either way, good choice here, being in touch with the base. We love to see it. Will it pay off? We'll have to see. I know a lot of people wanted to see Donald Trump be Speaker of the House, and it seems like Trump even said if it was for a short period of time, he would do it. But, I mean, it's not feasible. The guy's going to be going out there. He's running for president. I mean, he's got to take back this country, and he needs a Speaker of the House that's going to be on his side, that's going to fulfill his agenda. And somebody like Jordan at the helm would be phenomenal, honestly. I think that he would get a lot more done in those 2 years at least that he would have the House, assuming Republicans, if they win the presidency, keep the House, to get a lot done in those 2 years, a lot more so than he got done during his first 4 years, and a lot more done, especially compared to what we saw in the first 2 years when Paul Ryan was Speaker of the House. So 25 minutes in the books. We've done pretty much all the topics that I've really intended to cover here, which means we're going directly to the Super Chats, and we are going to see what you guys have said here in the chat. Boston Elevators and Aviation says updated GOP governors tier list and that general topic. I mean, I'm probably going to do tier lists at some point. If you've noticed, I've been uploading a lot more. We uploaded like 8 days in a row. So the content's definitely on the way. Probably going to mix in some shorts as well in the mix, which are kind of, I wouldn't say they're going to be tier lists, but they kind of, in terms of that type of category of stuff, I'd say it's more in line with that type of content. Andrew Mortensen says, Dems are going to bring back COVID for 2024. I mean, could they? I mean, it's possible. It's possible you get some new random variant, but I think a lot more people are not going to buy it this time around, to the point where it's like, yeah, try. It's going to backfire. Are they really going to tell people to mask up and get vaccinated for the 95,000th time? I mean, it doesn't work the same way anymore. It just doesn't. I mean, they ran with the narrative because it's funny, because now you have the DeSantis people. They attacked Trump because, oh, Trump was locking down and caved to Fauci at every turn and all, which, again, I think there were things Trump did that were missteps. I think the whole jab stuff, he oversold it. DeSantis also touted it, 1,500 times or something like that. But that's beside the point. What I will say is they were saying he was a murderer, and he was, because he was locking down he's locking down far less than a lot of other countries in the world did. And it's like, it's insane looking at it in retrospect. That was a literal campaign talking point. Trump was responsible for 2 million COVID deaths. That was a serious talking point that they used back in 2020. It's crazy. Eaters of Dead. So this is not about two different men. It's about two different, very distinct nations. Choose wisely. I agree 100%. It is two nations. It's two visions. It's the vision of the country. Which country are we exactly going to be? That's the real question. It is true that during Trump's presidency, yeah, I thought that, there were certain things that were not exactly going as good as I possibly thought they could have been going. But still, you had a nation that was far better and honestly far more on the right track than whatever we have right now. I mean, it's true. And technically, maybe we're going to see a backlash to what we have now. Maybe we're going to see a corner turned. I know we've said that for a long, long time. But the energy, is it shifting? Possibly. Maybe not electorally so much just yet. But we also haven't had a very high turnout election. Say whatever you want about 2022. Trump was not on the ballot, and Biden was not on the ballot. So, I mean, read between the lines. John Waffle says, do you think we will get a Trump versus Biden debate next year? I think Biden will get completely owned. Well, Trump demolished him in the second debate. I mean, the first debate, a lot of people didn't like Trump's performance because he interrupted and didn't exactly let Biden talk, which is basically when he trips over himself. He did that a lot in the second debate, and it worked. But I mean, it's not so much debates that are going to change people's minds. I mean, they're just like part of the campaign season more than anything else at this point. We're going to win by getting ballots in the ballot box. It's the only way. It doesn't matter if Democrats are in their basements or they can't talk properly and get embarrassed at a debate. Did John Fetterman getting embarrassed by Dr. Oz exactly amount to anything? No, it didn't. He went out there and he won. He won because Democrats have their turnout operation going and we don't, which, I mean, we're starting and we're talking about it and we're building it, which is good, but hopefully it's running smoothly in time to pay off. Gerald Armstrong says, did you see the NBC video of the old guy who said he'd vote for Biden if he was dead over Trump? which is what I think you were saying. Yeah, and honestly, it's like these people, they find these people. It doesn't change anything. How many times during Trump's presidency did we see CNN get like 6 people who claim to be Trump supporters, and then 3 of them said they were voting for Biden? I mean, it's all to set an agenda, to set a certain narrative. It's like when you look at Trump voters, like 90-some% of them voted for Trump again, to the point where it's like, no, that's not exactly representative of the full voting base at large. It's just not. Sam Madsen said, how would a Biden-Newsom primary go? It will not happen. There won't be a Biden-Newsom primary, in my opinion, because if they replace Biden with Newsom, Biden would just drop out. He wouldn't run at all, and then they would insert Newsom into the race. And while I think that there are probably talks about it, I don't think it's necessarily going to be their course of action. Security TV for $20 says, if you learned someone with a show in the Daily Wire were saying one thing but doing stuff that is very, very immoral but not illegal, would you keep your mouth shut or let people know? Well, what do you exactly mean? Are you saying like somebody that's like an influencer that says the right things but does immoral things but are not illegal? Would I keep my mouth shut or probably keep my mouth shut overall. Like, if there's a commentator that I like that, engages in some unsavory stuff, it's like I might know about it, but I'm not going to, I don't feel like I have a duty to tell everybody, because why would I exactly? If it's going to get out, it's going to get out. It's not my business. So, if that's like what you're trying to say, if it gets out, it gets out, but I'm not going to be that guy that's going to run around and, be shouting it from the rooftops per se. I think that's also wrong to a certain degree. Tucson PaleoCon for 20 says there's probably going to be a massive Ukraine-Israel aid package in Congress soon. That way most Republicans and Democrats agree on it, sadly enough. Oh, I agree 100%. That is a very, very plausible possibility. And you will see possibly even some Republicans who oppose getting more aid to Ukraine decide to latch onto it just because it gives aid to Israel. It is. To a certain extent, it is. Like, you have a lot of funding for certain wars and certain, firms like Raytheon exist. That's not technically the military, but you have defense contractors and all that. It's a big military-industrial complex, but overall, I don't think you're going to see the military privatized. The point of the military is to protect a certain nation. Eaters of Dead says Jordan is a founding member of the Freedom Caucus. It's true. Endeavor 25 says, bad take. The people want Israel destroyed. We must defend them in any way we can. Israel's a small country. It doesn't have the resources, but they do have the resources. This is why it's a good take. They do have the resources. They have the manpower. They could eviscerate Hamas overnight if they wanted to, and they possibly and probably will at this point, the more you see this taking place. And you do have Israel attacking them all of the time. It has been a kind of a two-way street. And that's not to say that Hamas is right, because they're not, but Israel absolutely does have the resources to take on Hamas. Hamas is a very, very, I wouldn't say like tiny little army of a couple hundred people, but there's 40,000 people max associated with Hamas. When you look at Israel, how many people do they have in their armed forces that are active? It's at least 3 times that. In the reserves, they have at least 4 times what they have active. And they could take care of themselves. They're not being invaded by China. They're not being invaded by Russia, whatever. Doesn't matter. Jason Christie says, honestly, I think Trump could win. Nebraska's second. I disagree. Nebraska's second is Don Bacon's probably not going to win in 2024. Still, you're going to have a lot of funding going his way, because he is a rhino. He's a part of the Uniparty. They're probably going to fund him more than funding other candidates, because, he's vulnerable. It's like, yeah, but you could win a lot more districts, not name this guy if you just fund them, but they'd rather have it's a club, folks. It's a club. That's how it works. But Trump's not going to win Nebraska's second. Just because of the fact that it voted for Biden by like 6, and it's trending left off a cliff. Even if you want to say he does better because Biden's unpopular, fine, but still, you can only mask trends for so long, folks. It's true. Alex Sorico says, how do we get Phil Scott to run for Senate in Vermont, or should we try? No, first of all, Phil Scott voted for Biden, for one. Number two, he's probably more liberal than Biden. For three, the guy is not going to win more likely than not, because you see these Republican governors who are very liberal that run in the Northeast all the time for Senate, and it just doesn't work. I think maybe if Charlie Baker decided to be an independent, he could give Warren a run for her money, because Warren is not really that popular, but still, I think he would come up short. And Phil Scott probably also would come up short, but he's basically got that governorship for as long as he wants it. It's the same reason why you won't see people like Chris Christie do well in the Senate race, even if he did have the approval rating he had back in 2013. Running him against Menendez, he probably still loses to Menendez, just because of the fact, assuming Menendez would win a primary, which I don't think he would at this point. But you look at that, just because of the fact that these national Senate races, they tend to be more polarized than not. So Jason Christie says, do you think there are any sleeper races Republicans could win in 2024, like ones that are normally safe D but could flip? I don't know about safe D. I think you look at races like Virginia's Senate race, that could be closer than people think. You look at Michigan's Senate race, like those could be closer than people think, depending on what happens with the state party between now and then. I know they're still incompetent, but Trump is somebody that could kind of transcend that a little bit, especially because Biden's popularity in these places has indeed gone off a cliff. Let's see. Eaters of Dead says, look up what a Fabian socialist is. What is their coat of arms? Hint, it's in their window. I have no idea. Feel like that's bait for something. I'm not going to do that. Base Cato says, thoughts on Rep. Bowman pulling the fire alarm before voting? You know, shitlibs would be screaming insurrection if a Republican... Oh, they absolutely would. They absolutely would. But they won't, because we understand how the narrative is set in this country, and it's not set by us. And part of that is our fault, but part of it is just the institutions are not on our side. But either way, it was just laughable. It was just laughable. He's a joke. He's a joke. Nobody likes these people. Nobody does. Mr. Napoleon says, who would be a better speaker, Gates or Donalds? I don't think Gates would ever get to be speaker. I think Donalds would be like the pick where it's like, okay, he's kind of more tame. He's not going to be in the media as much. But Gates is better on, well, it depends on the issues overall. I would say depends on the issue. I think Donalds would probably be more likely to be speaker in our lifetimes, though, so I will say that. Gates is kind of more libertarian. Donalds tends to be a little bit more conservative. So I don't know. I like both of them, though. I do like both of them. Andrew Mortensen says RFK should be VP for Trump, not run as independent. Well, I don't know if you'll see that ticket. I don't know how many people will view it as like a unity ticket. Let's see. Gerald Armstrong says, I have a conspiracy theory. I think Newsom is secretly rooting for Trump to win so it clears Kamala out for 2028. I mean, I think Newsom would destroy Kamala in a primary anyways, but I think 2028 is when you're going to see the Newsoms, the Whitmers, the Ossoffs potentially, and some of these other clowns. Josh Shapiro probably go run for president, and it's going to be a big primary mess. So hopefully we'll see what happens then. But 2028, that's around the corner. We're almost to 2024. Think about that. Andrew Mortensen says, run for House in 2030. Your advisor for Trump, please. Well, we'll see. We'll see. I mean, we've got a long way to go between now and 2030, or now and a possible Trump presidency. Security TV says, sometimes I think we need an American Inquisition. What do you mean by American Inquisition? Like imperialism? I don't know. Matt Gagnon for 2 says, you missed Lalo's super chat for 5. I don't believe that's real Lalo. I would have definitely read it if it was real Lalo, but Lalo decides to spend his money on very stupid things and very stupid decisions, unlike the correct decision, which would just be sending it to me. So Security TV says, I'm not saying there are witches everywhere, but there are witches everywhere. Evil going on left, right, and center. It's not witches. Witches are not real. It's demons. That's what it is. That's what we're up against. We're up against demons in many different ways, many different forms, and That's the way it works. And honestly, we have to fight back strong. If we're not going to fight back and we're just going to lay down and cave and just not do anything about it or take power and use power, then as a result, honestly, our country's going to be screwed. We're not going to be able to come back for this. We're not going to be able to recover. So Alex Sorico says Becky Edwards just announced to replace Romney. Is that true? And hopefully I think she'll lose a primary. I mean, how many times has she ran for something and gotten rejected? Every single time she runs, she's going to do worse and worse and worse in a given primary. I mean, at some point, something's got to give. And she couldn't win that House district where she had a primary opportunity that was relatively favorable for her. You had a big portion of Salt Lake in the district. She dropped the ball there. She lost to Mike Lee in an embarrassing fashion, to the point where it's like, what is exactly going on here? She would be Romney 2.0. She'd probably be worse than Romney. She'd be Liz Cheney, the senator, but possibly even worse than that. It would be an utter disaster if you had Becky Edwards in there. But thankfully, I don't believe that she is going to go out there and win that primary to the point where I think we're going to be all right. Obviously, we'll see. Let's see. What happened? Okay, never mind. I was looking at the other chat. I see a bunch of Fs, but I think that was from like 20 minutes ago. So we're 41 minutes in. Any more super chats? I mean, I don't think we have any right now, but we can look at regular chat as well. It does seem as if we're in a position right now that's a very, very interesting one. And that it goes for all of these things, whether you're talking about the presidential race or whether you're talking about what we're seeing here with these conflicts or whatever you're seeing for the speakership. It's funny because it seems like everything's going to bounce off for the speakership, and you're probably going to see more of the same. We have another super chat here from Andrew Mortensen. It says, can you tell I'm your biggest supporter? In all seriousness, though, as a Christian, I think the trends of the U.S. are only going downhill forward. Can only pray. Well, thank you for the super chat. It is true. That is something that's necessary. I don't believe that's all we can do. I don't believe we need a defeatist mindset. I think we have to really understand and know that God's on our side and ride that wave to victory. We can't sit here and cave and just say, oh, well, everything's just going to be better overnight, or everything is doomed and we can't come back from this, so we just have to pray. No, we have to pray. I'm not saying we don't, but I'm saying that on top of that, there has to be something that we have that's like this positive mindset that we're able to ride the wave for into victory. And if we can't do that, yeah, we will be doomed. So the mindset's important, and you can't accomplish anything when you have a mindset that is so defeatist. I mean, it's true. I know there's a lot of things going on that are bad, that are definitely demoralizing, but still we have to stay positive, or we're not going to be able to get out of this per se. Matt Gagnon for 5 says, Rep, I'm curious, if DeSantis becomes the nominee, would you support him in the general? Chances are low, but hypothetically. Well, he's not going to get the nomination, to the point where it's kind of like a question that is a dumb hypothetical. And I don't know if I really want to do hypotheticals. Judging based off of how DeSantis has run his campaign so poorly, I don't believe he would win. I don't believe he would win an election against Biden if he loses half of his support to some guy who gets indicted 4 times in that same time span, and he keeps nosediving because he's incompetent, because his surrogates are insufferable. Now, I'll vote Republican probably up and down the ticket regardless of the nominee, so long as it's not somebody like Nikki Haley or whatever. But still, I will say that it makes me it's very difficult right now for me to sit back here and say that I would just jump at the prospects to vote for DeSantis for president. He gets the nomination. I'll vote Republican. I'll support the nominee. And I know who the nominee is going to be, but I would support the nominee so long as it's not Nikki Haley or Chris Christie or one of those other people. But I'm not going to support DeSantis for president because he's not going to get the nomination. So it's pointless. It's completely pointless. And I would not be enthused to vote for anybody running for president right now to a large degree of enthusiasm except Donald Trump. He's the guy who's going to have to complete this comeback story. He has to. It's in his hands. He's got to deliver. Security TV says, Union Local 500 spreading lots of lies and propaganda against Youngkin in Virginia. Real dirty tricks. He's the best governor we've had in Virginia in years. Well, he is. Virginia is possibly going to go red completely at the state level this fall. It's not guaranteed. Part of that is because Youngkin is very popular in the state of Virginia, to the point where I don't know whatever pamphlets these people are passing out are really going to amount to anything. We could talk about them impacting like these local races, if they're giving hit pieces to certain candidates to people or whatever they're doing in terms of that. But in terms of Youngkin's popularity, he is very popular in Virginia despite being in a state that Biden won by 10 points. And I think a lot of incumbent governors overall just tend to be popular. There's a reason why we're not going to win Kentucky this fall, despite the fact that you're running a statewide official as a candidate. So, it does seem as if, we could be able to win that race. Well, if Beshear was not popular, then maybe. And I know Bashir's not as popular as some people make him out to be. And I'm not saying he wouldn't be possibly beatable even if you had the perfect candidate for the Republicans that was like lab generated or whatever. But either way, it does seem like he's not going to go anywhere, because I don't think a lot of people are going to turn out in the election for one compared to like a midterm year. And on top of that, he just is liked for some reason. And part of it is because he doesn't have the ability to do much, because you have a supermajority in the state legislatures that are Republican that override a lot of his vetoes. So that's kind of what dictates it. A history guy says, are Republicans still leading in early vote in Virginia? And what would be considered a good night for the GOP on Election Day this year? Well, they're still leading the early vote in Virginia, although they haven't maintained the lead as much, which was expected. I don't expect them to even win the early vote in Virginia, but they're doing better compared to previous years, which is good. So hopefully they have a very good Election Day turnout. And what would be considered a good night for the GOP this year would be retaking Virginia, possibly getting the Supreme Court seat in Pennsylvania, which I don't have high hopes for, but we'll see. And then you have a competitive election in Kentucky, which doesn't seem to be the case, but that would be a good night overall. Is Reeves winning by double digits? Are we just destroying the Democrat in Louisiana? We probably will. So we'll see. Andrew Mortensen says, DeLametis won't get the nomination. Trump will, and the libs are going to lose their minds and cry. Welcome to the movies, everyone. Well, yeah, they are. They 100% are. And this is what people don't seem to understand. They're pushing a candidate that's DOA in the primary because they're delusional. I don't want to hear any criticism of any election take that I've ever had from these lunatics, when not only did they elect the midterms the exact same way, but they're also predicting the guy who is down by 50 points to win the Republican nomination. I don't want to hear it. These people are delusional. They're lunatics, and they're not worth our time. They're just not. Joshua Mills says, God is on Israel's side. All one has to do is look at the past wars, Yom Kippur War, 6 Days War, and Israel comes out victorious. While being outnumbered, they will manage. Prayers for Israel. Thanks for the $10 there. But I will say this, the blind tendency of conservatives to support Israel does not mean we have to be giving billions of dollars in resources to them when they vastly outnumber their opposition. They could easily take care of it themselves. It's just another reason to ship more money overseas for something that we don't need to be doing that. It's just dumb. Been subsidizing them for how many years on end? Can't even subsidize our own southern border. It's true. John Waffle says, I know I'm getting ahead of myself, but I'm afraid Virginia may get a terrible Governor Spanberger if the party doesn't keep up the success of Youngkin. Well, that's a possibility for 2025 regardless. Youngkin's only a one-termer. He could run for governor in 2029. He can't run in 2025. And it's possible that if he's popular, you could have somebody that's close to him run for that seat. But I mean, do I see them going out there and like overnight just being able to hold it? Like, it's going to be a tough fight. I mean, you have to understand that there is a thing called party fatigue. And especially if Donald Trump is there and he's in the White House, I think that probably does flip. We could say it'd be close, and maybe Republicans will hold the state legislatures, but either way, it's no guarantee either way. Why does everyone not like DeSantis? I don't know. Maybe because he abandoned his state for a $200 million sinking ship that's divided the Republican Party unnecessarily and is delusional. And now his career for 2028 is basically over. I mean, maybe that's why. I don't know. It's just bizarre that some people are like, you can't criticize DeSantis. You can absolutely criticize DeSantis. Just like you can criticize Trump for certain things, you can criticize DeSantis. I've been critical of both over the past few years, but I'm being objective here when I say DeSantis has run an absolutely disaster of a campaign, and the guy's not likable. And you see him out there on the national stage. Maybe people like the idea of a Ron DeSantis, but that Ron DeSantis does not exist. You're not going to have, oh, well, younger Trump without the baggage. I mean, a lot of people see the headlines and they think that about DeSantis, and then they see him and then they read into him a little bit more, and it's like, yeah, maybe not so much. Maybe not so much. That's why Donald Trump is winning. Trump is in his late 70s now, but still, at the same time, he's still with it. He's still got it. You know, I don't really like this attack line even people use, oh, Biden's too old. No, Biden's not too old. He's too brain dead. There's a difference. You could be in your 90s and be with it and be sharp. You could even probably be in your hundreds and be more mentally, inclined than the current occupant of 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. It's obviously true. Or you could be in your 50s or 60 or whatever and be completely brain dead like somebody like John Fetterman. It's the way it works. I mean, Trump's age is not the main deterrent. Now, would I like for him to have a VP that's maybe 10 plus years younger? Yeah, I think it's good for the balance of the ticket. But overall, Trump at large, his age is not really the main problem. Sam Madsen said, can we ever flip Marquette County in Michigan? Possibly. You look at Marquette, it's a college town. I mean, Northern Michigan University's up there, which tends to be why it's voting Democrat at all at this point. But I still think there's room to grow. I think it would just take a good year for Republicans and a candidate that can really tap into that white working class base, possibly even more than Donald Trump already can, which we have yet to see who that candidate will exactly be. So, yeah, and Republicans have to build on this momentum, especially with turnout. They have to get Trump's base out in these states like Wisconsin to the polls the way Democrats get their bases out in these states. And I've yet to see them do that. Like, you see that in these ancestrally Republican states. You'll see that in, like, obviously Alabama, for example. You might see it in, like, Idaho, but you're not going to see it so much in a place like Michigan or Wisconsin. There's a massive infrastructure issue there, and you have a massive low propensity voter base that you're going to have to cater to. And just running some candidate who's a generic conservative that happened to be endorsed by Trump in a primary because they were going to win the primary anyway, that's not going to cut it. And that's not a loss on Trump, for example, that Tudor Dixon lost to Gretchen Whitmer. It's nothing to do with Trump. She was going to get that nomination anyway. She was backed by the Republican establishment. Which is why I don't understand why these people say, oh, the Trump candidates failed. Like, they can't even accurately give a coherent list of Trump candidates, because you see people like Mastriano lumped in with somebody like Tim Michels, who's just like a generic conservative. And then you have Don Bolduc they use for an example, despite the fact that Trump didn't endorse him until 2 days before the election, after he already won the primary, after he got the endorsement of Ron DeSantis, after Donald Trump endorsed Brian Kemp, who Donald Trump doesn't even like for governor of Georgia. So how is he exactly a candidate that qualifies as like a MAGA candidate? Because he lost. That's why. And he's so MAGA that he endorsed Nikki Haley for president. That's who Don Bolduc endorsed. So these people are incoherent. They just try to find ways to blame Donald Trump for everything. It's ridiculous. Dollar for Dollar sent $2 and says, I'm going to Liberty University in January from Texas. Well, congratulations. And Jason Christie says, do you think if the GOP wins the Virginia Senate and House that it would be a good idea to main rule the state? I mean, not necessarily. It's possible that given trends, Republicans are going to have a high floor there. If they can get their competence level down, up, I should say, maybe you have a chance. I don't know if main ruling states are really a great idea, because when you do it to a state, for example, like Georgia, you're going to see Democrats do it to other states when they have the opportunity. You'll see Democrats do it to a state like, I don't know, Wisconsin, if they ever have the chance. So I don't know. I would say that I typically don't like that mentality regarding using power, but when it comes down to a precedent set for like electoral purposes, I think it's a little bit different. I really do. And I'm not entirely sure if it's the best move when the door isn't 100% shut on a state like the state of Virginia. So FM32047 says, with the GOP trifecta coming in North Carolina, they must focus on Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Nevada, and even Virginia, and keep building on Youngkin's success, since Arizona and Georgia might be gone soon. Pennsylvania's wide open due to neither party doing well. That's possible. That is. I mean, just because Shapiro won by a lot in Pennsylvania and has a high approval rating doesn't mean the Democrats in Pennsylvania aren't necessarily broke. That's why they did the automatic voting registration, which, by the way, we could completely use to our advantage if we don't cry about it and go out there and actually start registering voters, because there's a lot of the unregistered voters in Pennsylvania. They're those low propensity voters. They tend to vote Republican. You got to get them to the polls. I'm not entirely sure that this automatic voter registration thing is going to hurt us, so long as we, don't do whatever the Democrats are doing with their voter base. And we're going to have to work harder, because you're looking at the Republican base and it's more rural. You're going to have to walk longer distances from door to door to get people to vote. I mean, like, it sounds ridiculous, but that does add up. It is resources. So we're going to need all hands on deck. Everybody in chat, if they can, is going to have to we need a record amount of volunteers. We need a record amount of people getting involved. That's how we're going to win. We're not going to win if we just sit back here and, only type in a live chat, which I'm not saying you're doing anything wrong, but what I am saying is, come election time, there's a lot of people out there that can, if they're able-bodied and they can volunteer, they have the time. And if they don't, it's kind of doing a little bit of a disservice. So I will say that they need the people, and I'm sure a lot of people are going to be on board, because this is the most important consequential election of our lifetimes. And I know we say that a lot, but every election cycle, it gets more consequential. I mean, it's true. You're seeing the way that the parties are moving, how broken Washington is. It's more broken than ever. And Donald Trump, that's part of his original message, works perfectly this time around, especially because he has experience. He has some solid victories that he delivered during his presidency, but there's a lot of unfinished business that does need to be done. The swamp does need to be drained. Didn't make enough progress there. Now he knows what he's up against. I'm not expecting the swamp to be drained in 4 years anyway. It's going to take a lot more time than that. But do I expect Trump to have a better political acumen in terms of knowing who his political enemies are? Absolutely. 100%. 100%. Because now he knows these people are trying to put him in jail. Like, that's the guy I want. I want the guy who's going to fight when he gets in there. I want the guy who's going to be put in prison potentially. I'm not necessarily saying he's going to go serve time, but they want to put him in jail because they don't like him. It's arbitrary reasons. They're trying to get him on things that aren't even illegal in many cases. And he's going to fight back because it's politically motivated. That's going to motivate him. So why not? And honestly, that just, it makes me more emboldened to vote for Trump. It does. And it should make a lot more people emboldened. And you could say, well, that doesn't make an impact. Well, more people emboldened means more volunteers, which means more ballots harvested, which means more votes, which means election victory. Enthusiasm does matter, so long as people channel that enthusiasm into working towards something in terms of actually building something that is a large network where they can get as many votes as possible. That's how elections are won. It's the way it works. So, yep, it doesn't exactly... This primary is over. It's over. General election time, it's all that matters. We're still going to cover the primary. Make no mistake about it. We're going to laugh. We're going to have fun. That's what we've been doing. We've been memeing. We've been dunking on some of these clowns. But, I mean, either way, it's just about having fun at this point. And we've been live for an hour, so we're probably going to end the stream. Last call for Super Chats, by the way. This is the official last call for Super Chats. Folks, the last call. And it doesn't seem as if we have any right now, but we'll give it a minute. You have 1 minute. We'll end the show. If not, either way, no problem. Gotten plenty already. A lot of people contributing to the discussion. Thanks for everybody who stopped by. Make sure you guys like the stream before you guys go as well, because that definitely helps out. Also, subscribe if you have not subscribed yet. If you haven't subscribed yet, what are you doing? You got to hit that button. We got to build up our arsenal here ahead of 2024. And we've been doing a good job. We've been turning that corner. We've been turning the corner. 154K will happen before we know it. It's been a while, but, got to get back for sure. Anyways, all right, we're going to end the stream. Thank you guys for tuning in. Like the stream before you go. Subscribe to the channel. Hit the bell. And I will see you guys in the next one. Red Eagle out.